and publish. With that, the journal's out now. Alright, let's read this thing. I speak fluent Newtopian now. It was only a matter of time before I covered this thing, people. After I thought my Amphibia retrospective was going to underperform, and then you guys gave it a ton of love, I decided it was my duty as an Amphibia fan to cover the faithful recreation of Marcy's journal. Now, if you're an Amphibia fan wondering if you want this book, I'm here to say, it's not a matter of want. It's a matter of necessity. There are so many awesome things in these 128 entries that retroactively make the show even better. So to save you time / explain why all Amphibia fans need this book in their lives, I don't even want to continue explaining, let's just do it. Top 10 awesome things about Marcy's journal. Also, there are going to be spoilers. Okay, 1, 2, 3, go!
No, I know, I missed you so much. Oh, I missed you too.
As much as I'm about to praise this book, one thing I wasn't thrilled with was how the paperback and hardcover versions came out on separate days. I prefer hardcover versions of books if it's possible, just because it makes the book a lot harder, no pun intended, to ruin. Higher integrity, I guess you could say. But that isn't really my point. As much as it sucked to wait longer, it was absolutely worth it.
I don't feel safe.
Not only because the book on its own was so good, but because the hardcover has something the paperback doesn't. A dust jacket. Now, normally I find those annoying, but it's what's on the inside that counts. An official map of Amphibia. It's so cool looking, and full of little details diehard fans like me will recognize. You see pretty much the whole road to Newtopia from Season 2. From Wartwood to the Ruins of Despair from Fort in the Road, Biddyburg from the Ballad of Hoppediah Planter, the Dry Swamp from A Caravan Named Desire, Quarreller's Pass from the episode of the same name, with the Elmwood Forest off to the side, Ribbitvale from Swamp and Sensibility, Stony Gulch from Wax Museum, and of course, Newtopia at the heart of it all. There's also the locations of all 3 temples, as well as some other bits, like Toad Duchies? Again, it's only a matter of time before I frame this thing, because I have no other use for a dust jacket. I find them annoying. But yeah, by any chance you've been contemplating whether to get the paperback or hardback version, the latter has my recommendation. Screw it if there's a cost difference. You won't regret it. Oh hey, look at that. What does it say? What a segue!
Oh, I missed you too.
Have you ever wondered how to decode the text that was plastered all over the temples? Well, with Marcy's journal, that's now easier than ever. While some fans have already deciphered the whole alphabet, there's an official guide at the back of the book. Makes sense, considering all the messages written entirely in the dead Newtopian language. And they're all stupid cool once you translate them. Some even provide new context. In fact, why don't we go over them? The 3 Stones of Power. We thought they were a gift, but they are more likely a curse. One was found in each of the 3 lands, and great wars were waged by nations hoping to possess all 3. These great stones would make nearby crops grow better. They could heal the wounds and cure the disease of those who touched them. Most of all, though, they could destroy the foes of those who wielded them. Well, that's an interesting bit of writing. Most of it sounds like what we already know, but the real kicker to me is the use of the words 3 lands. Wait, there's 3 of them? For a minute, I thought maybe this wasn't referring to what it sounded like, and maybe only pertained to the 3 predominant species of Amphibia: frogs, toads, and newts. To be fair, the 3 species do live in separate places, that is to say, separate lands, but the toads don't really have a specific area of inhabitants since there are north, south, east, and west toad towers. The frogs and newts do, those being the Frog Valley and the capital of Newtopia respectively. Not the toads though, so I'm just about ready to rule out this possibility. Now, would it be 3 worlds? That's up for debate. You may remember in Escape to Amphibia when Terry said there are infinite possibilities in the multiverse, or how the Guardian mentioned that they've watched over countless worlds. So yeah, it's safe to say that it's not just limited to the 2 worlds we actually saw in the show. Not to mention, this show seems to have had an obsession with 3s. 3 girls, 3 stones, 3 seasons. Technically, each of the stones could have been hidden in 3 worlds, but let's assume because of the events of the series, 2 of the 3 worlds were Earth and Amphibia. So what was the 3rd world? Bangladesh. Like I said, it's debatable, if that's even what this message is referring to. Maybe we'll find out in some other continuation, but anyway, moving on to the next entry. The inventor of the box, the wisest newt of them all. She managed to unite the kingdoms under one banner, a banner of interdimensional conquest and ambition. Peace came to Amphibia, and with it a golden age. However, this peace led to the conquest and subjugation of other worlds. The inventor of the box faded into obscurity, burdened by guilt and sadness. It is said that even death could not hinder her quest for redemption, and that she still travels the world in spectral form alongside her winged purple companion to this very day. What is her duty? Will her soul ever find peace? It's Valeriana. The winged purple companion thing is what gave it away. So that's a neat perspective enhancer. So while the Guardian created the stones to see how mortals would handle unlimited power, Valeriana created the music box as a means of harnessing the power of the stones. Adds a little more meaning to the expression on her face as the box faded away in the last episode. Also, she's apparently a ghost? Yeah, she's been going around wherever in spectral form for who knows how long. This provides a pretty clever explanation for how she just spawned in wherever she showed up in the show. That whole out to lunch shtick, that was an alibi! Closure I didn't know I wanted. What will happen to us? Ever since the box left our world, we have been plunged into a new dark age. The technology we once used to control wildlife is no longer available to us. Our cities are becoming overrun with beasts and monsters who have not troubled us for centuries. We cannot stay here. We must leave and find a new way of life. Oh stones, oh glorious stones, why have you abandoned us? Is this our punishment? Did our greed bring us here? I'm really not sure who wrote this. It's the only message in the book itself that isn't written on a coffee-stained green sheet of paper. It couldn't have been Marcy, since she didn't know all of this yet. But it also couldn't have been Andreas, because this is when Marcy was on the ding-dang Dawnblood Islands with her Night Guard crew. Or maybe one day Andy just grabbed Marcy's journal without her looking, and then wrote stuff down on a random page. Could be, as indicated by the bent corner of the page. Wait, still no, because Andy can't hold human-sized pens, because he crushed them before too long. Maybe one of the Night Guard members just knew too much? The three will come. It is only a question of when and how. Their coming will shake the foundations of this land and let us begin anew. Praise be to the three. Their choice will reveal salvation or indeed punishment. But beware, dark forces will destroy our history and try to confuse our saviors when they arrive. Mother has foreseen it. Yeah, sounds about right if you know how the prophecy goes. There's also a couple of Utopian writings on the map of Amphibia. One in the bottom left-hand corner that reads, "If thou seeketh adventure, then this great land shall suffice. But beware, for every great dream will always have its price." Tell that to Marcy, as well as one in the upper right-hand corner which just reads Property of the Royal Cartography Society. Finally, there's one more message on the back cover. Quoting the final line from this series, it reads, "Of the things you let go, you'd be surprised what makes its way back to you." Aw, Matt!
Oh, I missed you too!
It should be no secret that Marcy carried this journal around a lot. Wouldn't she have gotten a lot of smudge and fingerprints on the covers? Actually, yes! If you look closely at the covers, or look at them from a certain angle, you may notice that actual dust and smudge is visible. That's kind of all I have to say. It's not much of anything, but it's worth mentioning, and a sweet little detail to have implemented.
Oh, I missed you too!
You remember Marcy's theme song Takeover, right? Pretty cool, right? But, who exactly were these guys? Well, presumably, they were the people Marcy hung out with during Season 1, which was before we met her. But if you were especially curious, that's what this book is for. These guys are Femur, Javi, and Kettle of the Utopian Night Guard. It adds quite a bit of nice additional context, and honestly, there are a lot of twists and turns that I'd rather not spoil, but I weirdly found the book more interesting once it got to the journal entries of stuff we did get to see in the show. Remember how Marcy had her nose in the journal on and off throughout the first temple? Well, now you can see what she was writing. Want to know more about how Marcy felt when Anne left to go to war with the planters in A Day at the Aquarium? Yeah, Marcy's not straight. Honestly, I find it just as, if not more fascinating than Marcy's adventures during Season 1. Not to say those bits weren't interesting, but dang did it feel good to see some official illustrations of Anne and the planters after so long. It just brings back so many fun memories. But you may be wondering, well, what happened during Season 3 while Marcy was either dead or possessed? Or a third of the pages just left blank? Well, yeah. Something happens then, and it's just as cool to me.
Oh, I missed you too!
Remember how in the Gravity Falls journal, Dipper starts writing in the blank pages until the author is revealed? A similar thing happens here. The book is forked over to Anne once it reaches Season 3. And call me crazy, but this just might have been the peak of my interest. Sorta like Season 2 with Marcy, we saw pretty much all of what Anne writes about in these entries happen in the show. But like I said, it felt really, really good to see these characters and hear stories about them once again. We also get quite a taste of how Anne was feeling at the time. Those of you who felt like the planters weren't being careful about keeping a low profile during Season 3A will be pleased to see these entries. Anne found a gosh darn gray hair from all the stress. There's doubt that Marcy is okay, doubt that Amphibia is okay while they're stuck on the other side. And while it's a little depressing in places, it definitely enhances the show. Anne also answers a question I had from Temple Frogs about how Anne actually got her hands on the journal in the first place. Marcy must have just slipped it into Anne's backpack right before she got in the portal. Good enough for me. Even in the few Season 3 episodes where Anne doesn't appear, there's an entry from her that relates to the episode. Where Turning Point was happening, there's an entry about Anne and Sasha's relationship. Where Olivia and Yunnan was happening, there's an entry about Anne's relationship with Marcy. And where The Core and the King was happening, there's an entry about King Andreas. Everything else you'll probably remember happening to Anne in the show. And dang man, nostalgia's a hell of a drug. Love it. If there was one thing that disappointed me about this book, it's that I would have liked an entry or 3 from Sasha. Maybe ones that took place during Season 3B, when Sasha was part of the main cast, and, the journal was easily accessible to her. It could have been really nice to see her perspective. But the fact that we didn't should not diminish from the fact that Anne and Sasha's argument about Marcy now makes even more sense. So you know how Anne was in defense of Marcy, but Sasha was struggling to cut her any slack? Well, now we know that that's most likely because Anne has read through Marcy's notes and seen her intrusive thoughts while she was living the fantasy, whereas Sasha hasn't. So it's much harder for Sasha to understand Marcy. I didn't think I could love the finale any more than I already did, but this show just never ceases to impress me. This is a wonderful way to change the perspective. Of the journal, of Anne, of the audience, just everyone and everything.
Oh, I missed you too!
I was reading Anne's entries when I saw this. Whoa, what? Yeah, Sasha's parents are divorced. We already figured out that much, but nevertheless. It helps to see why Sasha was such a control freak in the trio. Probably out of jealousy that her 2 friends were parented by a functioning couple. She's felt lost on the subject of family, but hey, she gets 2 Christmases now, yay! Again, we already figured out this much from the show, but it's really nice to have acknowledged and discussed this. When I think of covering unanswered questions in a book tie-in, this is what I like to think of.
Oh, I missed you too!
In the flashback at the beginning of the Third Temple, we saw how Anne and Marcy met Sasha back when they were kindergartners. But this of course implies that Anne knew Marcy before she knew Sash. But how did those 2 meet? Well, leave it to this book to answer that question for you. When Anne was 3, she went to the beach, and she was playing in the water. She then saw another girl about her age working on a big old sandcastle. Anne invites the girl to join in her activities, but the girl passes in favor of continuing work on her masterpiece, a recreation of the castle from her favorite fantasy JRPG. This girl is 3, by the way, and yeah, she's Marcy. Anne then helps Marcy protect her masterpiece, swatting away any incoming waves with their toy shovels. Massive W for wholesome. It's one thing to provide some additional context for the people who wanted it, but this crew just had to do it in the cutest way possible, didn't they?
Oh, I missed you too!
See this entry here? Clearly written after Battle of the Bands. So what's the awesome detail here? Marcy attached Anne's note sheet for no big deal to the page. But that's not all. Matt Brawley confirmed on his socials that this is the actual note sheet the writers used to brainstorm the song. Admittedly, I had a feeling this was the case, but that doesn't take away from what a nice touch that is. Doubly so considering how it makes just as much sense in the show's canon. Really nice touch.
Oh, I missed you too!
Of course, there's an entry for True Colors. Not much of one, but that's almost exactly why the episode is now more painful. Marcy starts off so sure that this is all gonna go so well, just objectively stating, "Sorry Mom and Dad, move our home wherever you want. I've made a better one with the people who really get me. The 3 of us belong together, forever." Or, "This is only the end of the first chapter, and there's still a whole book left to go. Don't wake me from this dream." And then on the following page, you can just see it was written in the middle of the sky, while Marcy is having a panic attack as everything has come crashing down. There are singed edges, tear stains, and it looks like it was written in such a hurry. Marcy's handwriting gets bigger when she just wants to scream out with regret, smaller when she just wants to cry about it. I almost want to cry just looking at it. And the fact that, towards the end, Marcy recalls the events of True Colors as that horrible night. And yeah, that makes sense. But it just hurts hearing her say that about an episode we all loved. Well, I mean, this episode was undeniably emotionally damaging, but there were some scenes that I was also cheering during, case in point Anne's power. So as much sense as it makes, it doesn't make it easier to confirm that the characters were having no fun at all. Again, I was not having fun watching the episode, not that I was having that much fun watching these characters nearly die this much. Not long after that, Marbles also refers to the whole adventure as dumb and misguided. Which hurts that it makes as much sense as it does. Good surely managed to come of it all, but Marcy's not wrong. It did cause a lot of pain, none of which would have happened if not for her. Much like True Colors itself, it causes quite the emotional pain, but sometimes being emotionally powerful in any sense is amazing in itself. Finally, much like the show, the book's ending is unquestionably the best part. Everything from the end of the adventure where Marcy finally gets her hands back on Joe, to the entries from the 10-year time skip will continue to amaze me, making me sad yet happy. We find out that all three girls' parents were immediately on the other side of the portal after the goodbye scene. Everything feels just right at home. Marcy finally has the strength to accept the move, thanks to the people she's leaving behind, and the girls finally get a little time to just be close and have fun together, while everyone and everything makes amends, and Marcy gets checked by a ton of doctors. It's just so pleasant in itself, while also being the sweetest thing ever to a veteran fan of the series like me. We get to see Anne and Sasha participating in a full D&D campaign before Marcy moves, and Marcy can tell this time that they're not having the time of their lives. Not that they didn't enjoy it at all, but we organically get to see what held the girls' friendship back in the first place. And the fact that the girls actually see each other's perspectives now shows just how much better friends they are, even if they eventually realize they needed some space. Yeah, so it's implied that Marcy found Joe 10 years later while she's going through some of her middle school junk. She gives a quick recap, mentioning that she, Anne, and Sasha have texted and called whenever they possibly could, for the first year. Marcy shares that it still felt healthy, and believe me, I know that feeling. Do I even need to say anymore that these girls don't love each other any less just because they took some necessary time away from each other? And hey, they still came back together in the end, so it all evens out, right? Now to address what I believe has become the elephant in the room, there were a couple loose plot threads dangled here. Marcy mentions when she's meeting up with the girls for Anne's 23rd, that she might stick around in LA. Sasha's letting her stay for however long she wants, and as a webcomic artist, it doesn't really matter where she works, so why not let the things that made their way back to you stay? Does this diminish from the show's message? I don't know if I'd say so. Part of this series was a whole message about moving on as change inevitably happens, but of the things you let go, you'd be surprised what makes its way back to you. Is it displayed well enough by three girls hanging out together years after they grew apart? Definitely. It's part of why I love the finale so much. Would it be nice if they actually did get a whole lot closer from here on out? Honestly, sure. That's also a pretty common occurrence, you'd be surprised. But I feel like if we actually saw that, it would cross the line where it does take away from the message. Like I've been saying, this is all a very natural and realistic portrayal of long-term friendships. But seeing as this is part of the show's magic, the happy ending is probably best left ambiguous, especially since they told us that the girls grew apart and not showed us. Only ever showing the girls being close would make the whole thing about the girls falling in different friend groups feel much less believable. And ambiguity is just what Marcy gives us. She alludes to coming back to live in California, not confirms it. And the thing you've been waiting for me to talk about, Marcy then shifts over to Mr. X and Terry giving her a phone call later that day. Allegedly, they had a big breakthrough, and they're all going to meet back up in the lab the next day. So, are they actually going to get back to Amphibia? Make of it what you will. It is mentioned just how much power it's going to take to get a working portal that can fit people through it, like we saw in Escape to Amphibia. But this just might be what the girls have waited to hear for 10 years. The last few entries in the journal before the time skip pretty much confirm that the portal has been a concern of theirs since the events of the finale. Seeing as they've been at work for a decade, it seems like enough years of research, experimentation, and trial and error to make a full-fledged portal. At least, I think so. Now, do I want a time skip movie of the girls returning to Amphibia after all the years? Oh, Jesus, no. My thoughts on a potential Amphibia spin-off are that it could work, it just has to take place in Amphibia with the people of Amphibia, not the girls. I've already explained how what happened with the girls over time is just perfect for the show, so I don't think you would be surprised to hear me say that their stories are over and best left untouched as far as the future goes. But even if this talented crew really had that much of an itch to continue the adventures of the Calamity Trio, the least they could do is not let them back to Amphibia. The goodbyes and the fact that the girls will never see their best friends and found families again have got to be the single most effective thing about the ending of this series. Amphibia ended in the way Starverses did not have the balls to, so especially after a whole show about embracing change, returning to Amphibia is too good to be true. If Marcy moving back to LA in the adult life would cross the line of diminishing from the show's message, then the line would go out of sight to a timeskip movie. I simply do not want to see that. But of the things you let go, do I need to say it? To be fair, I only said I don't want to see that. Like I said, a breakthrough probably could have happened after a whole decade. And by only hinting at a return, much like everything else that was alluded to, we kind of get the exact right balance of sometimes you have to let it go, and you'd be surprised what makes its way back to you. You know what I mean? As much as this may feel like having your firstborn child dangled in front of you just to taunt you, I want this to stay a loose thread. It's just the perfectly ambiguous icing on the cake that is this damn near perfect final farewell. And that doesn't even begin to cover it all. Special mentions have to go to the tear stains on the page's characters' cried writing, the fact that the words poggers and sus have canonically been used in a Disney product, and what just might be the final animation we ever see from this show for years to come. Wow, that was a weirdly somber concluding note. In Marcy's journal, A Guide to Amphibia, Marcy is revealed to be attracted to women. Get this book if you like Amphibia. It's the next step in your denial. Okay, bye!